Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast, presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We're part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Sam Phalen. We'll talk Commodore basketball. Let's get right to our interview with Sam. Sam Phalen's our basketball guy at Vandy Sports. He joins us. Sam, hope you're doing well. Disappointing week for the Commodores.
Yes, sir, Chris. I'm doing well, but like you said, just a tough week for Commodores basketball here as the season winds down, and a few tough pills to swallow for the fans.
You know, the one bright spot in it is Scottie Pippen. He's just been unbelievable. He's been a joy to watch. He's playing the best basketball at what looks like the end of his Vanderbilt career, and man, he's just carrying them at times, it seems to me.
Yeah, I think it's important too. I think a lot of fans kind of had a sour taste in their mouth from the end of the game against Florida, and some of, obviously the turnover, which Pippen had a hand in, and then missing the free throws at the end. But I don't want that to dilute the quality of basketball that he's been playing recently. As you head into the SEC tournament, the one thing that you really can feel good about is the performance of Scotty. 20 points in 6 straight games, and he's been up around the 30 mark over the last couple, and he's been efficient, been passing really well. And like you said, if it is the end of his Vanderbilt career, he is leaving his mark and going out at his absolute best. And you like to see a guy at the pinnacle of his game towards the end of the year, especially if he's going to be your anchor as you head into March.
I'm at the point where, okay, they're below 500 now. I don't know what else to talk about. So let's go into the mailbag because there's some good questions here.
Yeah.
Our mailbag is presented by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call. That number 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Door King wants to know, what can Vanderbilt do to secure an NIT bid? Well, first of all, you got to get to, I think, at least 500, if not above it. So that would include, probably need to beat Ole Miss. Would have to beat Georgia in the SEC tournament and then either win one more, or I don't know if the NIT's taking 500 teams these days or not. I don't know what the rule is anymore, but I think that's a minimum, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I think it's a win over Ole Miss, finish the regular season at 15-15, and then win over Georgia. And I think you have to win another one. You have to get to that third day of the SEC tournament in order to give yourself a shot. I will say, even though the record wouldn't be there, I do think there is an argument to be made for Vandy's resume in terms of the NIT and wanting to see them there. They have played good games against a lot of NCAA tournament teams, and they have wins over, teams like Arkansas now, who are pushing the top 10 in the country potentially, and they a few good performances that I do think would go a long way into that. But at the bare minimum, you're going to have to win your next 3 if you want to make the NIT and give yourself a chance to keep playing.
Yeah, the computer rankings, I think, have got them right there as an NIT level team. But again, it's the record that's problematic.
Yeah, they're not that far behind when you look at things like KenPom, and part of that is some of the quality of schedules and some of the tight wins that they've sort of had. I'm trying to scroll through it right now and see where they're 79th as of this moment in the KenPom rankings. So when you look at that's probably right on the bubble of the NIT, maybe a little bit outside looking in. So I do think a few wins could have them jump up a little bit, but those aren't going to be 3 easy games to win either. You'd like to think they'd beat Ole Miss and Georgia, but that third game there, whoever it ends up being, that's not going to be an easy one.
Yeah, I'm looking at the computer rankings here. I'm looking at their net sheet. Hang on, let me pull it up. And this might be a day or two old. They were, the result-based metrics, they are 80th in KPI, 90th in strength of resume, 73rd in ESPN's BPI, 79 in Pomeroy, 76 in Sagarin. So, yeah, I mean, basically, 48 teams or so make the once you adjust for the one bid conferences and all that, there's about 48 teams that make it, that are, make it on the strength of what they do outside of the conference tournament.
You get the at-large, about 48 at-larges there, and then
there's 32 NIT. So basically, it puts you in the top 80. I mean, they're right there, but got to have the wins. Now, it might be on the low end, but you got to have the above 500 record.
Yeah, and I mean, you're looking at then too, in that, like we said, that third or that potentially second SEC game there. You're looking at playing. They'll get the number 6 seed. So as that sits right now, it's a rematch against Florida, but that could still be, LSU, South Carolina, Alabama, depending on how this last weekend plays out. But those are all teams that have given Vanderbilt fits for the most part with Florida, Alabama, and South Carolina so far.
Yeah, and I've done some projecting ahead in terms of who I think will win in the league this weekend and what that would mean. Vanderbilt's going to be the 11 playing 14 Georgia regardless, but I think Alabama is who I've got projected to land that 6th seed, and if so, the winner of Vanderbilt-Georgia would play Alabama. So there you go.
Yeah, so to answer the question, you have to beat Ole Miss, you have to beat Georgia, have to beat Alabama, and then potentially even you might be looking at trying to knock off like an Arkansas or a Tennessee there if you get the 3 seed. So it's going to be tough. But it really comes down to, one, how many bid stealers there are. I think for the NCAA tournament, if you have a lot of these these really high-end mid-major teams getting knocked off in their conference championships, you're going to have a lot of them sliding down into the NIT bracket with some of the bid steals. That obviously makes less space for a team like Vanderbilt coming out of a Power 5 with a little bit of a worse record. And then it's also just going to be on what the committee's valuing in terms of, strength of schedule and strength of some of the losses versus what the overall record is for a team.
Okay, Musa wants to know how many years are left on Stackhouse's contract. That is 3 after this year. And then he wants to know from you, knowing that, if you're the AD for a day, what do you do with Stackhouse's contract?
I mean, if I'm the athletic director right now, I'm not sure I'm touching it. We talked a little bit ago about, a potential extension. I think that with the way things have played out, there's a lot more concern, I think, has been raised over the last few weeks just on some tendencies of Vanderbilt late in games, some of the coaching, just questions late in games as well, where you might raise a little bit of a red flag regarding whether or not he's extension ready. But I also don't think that I would be in a spot to move on just yet from Jerry Stackhouse. And you can have your opinion on him one way or another, whether you're bought in or not bought in. But yeah, I think right now you kind of have to, you're in a wait and see type of spot. You see, how, first of all, how the next team shapes up in terms of returners, who's moving on, and then what the transfer portal is looking like for both incomers and those leaving the program. But you see what the team looks like, and for now you have to stand pat and just hope that he's able to turn things around a little bit, and before there's really any real cause for going in a different direction.
Yeah, and just to, I guess, give something besides opinion, what I have heard is that they're not making them, or I shouldn't say definitively they're not making a move. I have no reason to think they're making a move. What I have heard is internally it has been processed as he's improving the program. Injuries really hurt them this year, and he's got a good recruiting class coming in next year. So I think that's how they're looking at it. And
I want to say too, Chris, I'm not. This is not a endorsement necessarily of Jerry Stackhouse as Vanderbilt's head coach, but I do think there is a tendency within college basketball, to some degree college football, but in the college basketball world specifically, to push coaches and push things out the door before they're really given time to develop. And like I said, that's not a full endorsement of Stack or what he's done. I definitely can list a bunch of areas in which I think he can improve, and I think he needs to improve. But there has been some positive development within the program over the last few years since he took over from a winless Vanderbilt program within the SEC. And I think you'd be remiss if you didn't give that a chance to at least see year 4 and see what it has. And if after another year of him recruiting, bringing in a good class and being active in the transfer portal, if you're still looking at any more regression or lack of progress, then I think it's a fair assessment to be like, we've given him 4 years of our program and we haven't seen anything to show for it. But I would be cautious to try and move on a little bit too soon and push out a lot of the positive momentum you may have.
Well, here's what's interesting, Sam. The coaches in this league, I believe Stackhouse is the only one without prior college experience. And every coach at every program in the SEC, let me just look this off mentally. Every coach in this league, other than Stackhouse, who had never held a college job, has had success at least one other college stop. You got Tom Crean, who's been to a Final Four, won the Big Ten twice. He's going to get fired at Georgia at year's end. Missouri, a lot of fans are ready to move on from Conzo Martin. Ole Miss fans aren't enamored with Kermit Davis right now. Ben Hallen at Mississippi State's another one I think you could see go. Florida fans aren't super happy with Mike White, and they're not going to be happy if they don't make the the NCAA tournament, which I think is probably less than 50-50 right now, but Gators have got a shot to get there. South Carolina tried to run Frank Martin out of town a year ago, and I think he stood his ground. I don't know where that resolves. Carolina's won 9 games, and so that may get him another year, but I think they need to get back to the tournament next year probably. Point is, half the league right now, I think half the fan bases literally are somewhat unhappy with their coaches, and these are all coaches that have won at previous stops. It's just a brutal league. This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast is made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. And just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. And what people like about the experience is the ambiance. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. I went in and looked at it myself. That's exactly what it is. It is a relaxing, friendly environment. So whether your dental needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody. Call him at 615-270-2322. His office is located at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown Nashville, not far from the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player, a huge booster of Commodore athletics. His support as the title sponsor for Season 7 is the reason we are able to do this podcast. Go see Dr. Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of the Vandy Sports Podcast and tell him you heard about it here.
Well, Chris, I think too, that speaks to that idea that I said about you don't want to push something out too soon. I think one thing, a view in which fans can get a little bit disoriented is, change does not always mean that the grass is greener. And I think that's something to keep in mind of, if Vanderbilt did decide to move on from Jerry Stackhouse after this season, how confident are you, one, in a coach wanting to choose Vanderbilt as their destination for the next spot in their career, and then two, that a coach could come in and have success? And I think all those examples you listed are, good examples of the fact that, hey, college success does not necessarily translate to a new school, especially within the SEC. And, just because they're moving on from Stack, you have to keep in mind repercussions that could have on things like a transfer portal or decommits on your recruiting side. if Stack has really close relationships with some of those kids that have their eyes on Vanderbilt or are getting set to come to Vanderbilt, what does that mean for their futures and their future at Vanderbilt? So those are all things you have to keep in mind. And like you said, just because they go in a different direction, even if they were able to nail someone with a lot of, college success. I even look outside of the SEC, somebody like Porter Moser over at Oklahoma, he's built an incredible Loyola Chicago program. They moved on. He moved on rather to Oklahoma. And now, people already kind of want him out after a bad year at Oklahoma this year, while Loyola Chicago is pushing the tournament again. So sometimes it's more of a program success than it is a coach's success. And you never really know what you're getting until it plays out.
There's a couple of questions about the roster, the portal, that kind of thing. Let's go over what we think the returning roster might look out before the portal and all that, before we hit those, because I think context is important. Okay, so Pippen has said he's leaving. I would presume we'll take him at his word still there. You'd presume Jordan Wright will be back for a fourth year. There's been talk that Malora Brown and Robbins will return.
Yeah, that has been the rumor so far, that both those guys have interest in running it back for an extra year and being on the court together. They've both just raved after games playing together about what the other one does for their confidence on the floor and what they're capable of doing when they're out there together. So I wouldn't be surprised if whatever direction the two of them go in, if it's not in sync with the other one.
Yeah, so I think you've got a solid 3-4-5. It's not an upper half of the league 3-4-5, but it's solid at least. The rest of the roster is where I get concerned.
Yeah, depth has been an issue for this team. That's been as clear as day, just with some of the bench problems. And until the recruiting class gets in here, you really don't know what you have. We've been saying it for weeks, though, Chris. I do think, if you're assuming that, again, taking Pippen at his word that he is going to go pro after this year and he won't be at Vanderbilt, you'd have to think Stack is going to look for a lot of backcourt help in the transfer portal.
Yeah, I'll just be blunt. They're going to have to find one or two studs because they're losing the only one they've got.
Yeah. They're losing the only one they got, and they're losing a lot of the guys who you feel okay being out there. Rodney Chapman not coming back. Even somebody like Drew Weichert, who, you can knock Drew for some of his lack of athleticism, sometimes lack of size, matching up in the SEC. But Drew Weichert's been a nice, high IQ player out there that will knock down open shots and has been somebody that Stack has leaned on in the absence of Rodney to really take some of those minutes. You're looking at both of those guys walking out the door as well. So now three of the main guys in your backcourt that you're giving regular minutes to are looking like they might be going elsewhere and moving on after college basketball. So, it's going to be more than one. You can't just rely on the freshmen to come in and take all of that responsibility. You're going to have to be very active in the transfer portal and trying to convince some studs around the league that this is the best opportunity for them as they look to further their basketball career.
I think this is one of the big questions for next year. JD Icav asks, first, have you heard about any players looking at the portal, and then what your analysis is of Lawrence and Dizon?
I haven't heard anything. I don't know what you've been hearing, Chris.
I haven't.
My analysis. I think I'm not sure you will necessarily hear anymore until maybe after the season. Just in terms of, I think a lot of people like to respect the idea of, you want to finish things out. Same deal with coaches. It's like until you've played that last game, you kind of keep things, whatever you're thinking about doing, on the low until then. My analysis of Lawrence and Dizon is I'm not sure it's changed. I like the build of each of them. I like the athleticism. They both have good size, good bodies to play guard in the SEC. Neither one of them has shown the ability to score well enough to make me feel like, at this point at least, they could be a starting caliber point guard in the league. And that's not to say that can't change as they grow and they develop, but that's kind of been the reason why I feel like Stack has been playing with their minutes a little bit and seeing what works, because, they both show flashes of, hey, I can score, I can attack the rim, I can distribute, play good defense, I have a good body. And then there's other times where they just look out of control. They don't look as polished on the offensive end of the court. So I think they both have a lot of work to do. Obviously there's going to be opportunity in the Vanderbilt backcourt next season for one or both of them to step up into some bigger roles on the team if they are here. But they have to be able to score the ball, because when you're losing Pippen, you're losing 20 points per game. Someone's got to be your usage leader. You're losing a lot of touches in Pippen, more than just points. You're losing the guy who runs your entire offense, and one of them has to work on being reliable enough to have the ball in their hands and operate the offensive scheme. And right now, I don't think you can look at either one of them and think they do that consistently enough to feel good about it.
Well, I guess where their strength will be next year is front court, presuming that Dort is something near the hype. Then you've got a pretty good starting point there, but it's just who can run a team, who can be efficient scoring. And I just think that losing Pippen, Jordan Wright and a lot of other guys are beneficiaries of better looks with him around that are going to go away when he's gone.
Yeah, look, the front court I feel good about, like you said, with Dort, if you have Quentin and if you have Liam back, you feel really, really good about what you have there. You'll still have Wright, you'll still have some size that can shoot in Miles Studi, but almost all of those guys have had a lot of their points come from the creation of Pippen and what Scotty's able to do with the ball in his hands and the amount of attention that he attracts. So that is the question mark. You're going to have the bigs to bang down low with the SEC, like the monsters of the SEC. You're going to have some shooters on the roster still that can knock down open shots, but who is going to be your conductor that is not only poised enough to deliver the basketball to these guys and make sure they're getting open looks, but also command enough attention and be enough of a scoring threat that they're kind of creating open looks for other players.
Ann Arbor wants to know what grade we'd each give Stackhouse and ask for A through F grades for this season, starting with recruiting. I'll let you go first. And that includes the transfers, by the way.
You're making me go first. You're putting me on the so we're talking.
I'll go first if you like, but
the hot seat. So you're talking recruiting as in his current freshman class and the transfers he brought in.
I think he says for this season, so I think that it does not include the guys that are not here yet. So what's on this roster? Okay. How do they do in terms of recruiting?
I'm going to let you go first. I'm going to make you take that one, and I'll work off of you.
I'd give him a D+, C-. Pippen was he gets credit for getting Pippen, right? And I get that the Robbins thing hasn't worked out like they'd hoped, and certainly the Chapman thing hasn't, but he didn't do enough. He didn't work hard enough. He didn't recruit smart enough in his first 2 years. And I think if he had done that and there was more of a backdrop when things go wrong, I wouldn't give a hard grade, but I know too much about the effort or lack of it that was put in the first 2 years to just absolve him just out of injuries and bad luck or whatever.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a little bit more generous. I'd probably say a C to a C+. I do like some of his offensive schemes that we've been seeing recently. He has shown a little bit of his basketball mind, and he has ability to get creative looks and get open shots, and that's something that they've done well all season. Getting some shooters like Trey Thomas, who, does not have an SEC body, doesn't have an SEC skill set, but can shoot the lights out when he gets going. And Stack does a nice job of getting him and Miles Studi and other people good looks. And like you said, I credit him for Pippen. I really do like what he did with Chapman and Robbins, and it hasn't worked out as he envisioned or as maybe everybody else envisioned. But I do think when fully healthy, he had a really good thought in place for both of them. And I also like some of his development in guys like Quentin Milora-Brown. And, that was a guy coming into this season that I didn't expect too much from. And Stack was throwing him out there as a starter every day. And we saw what he saw in Quentin throughout the season and the development and the impact player that he quickly became for Vanderbilt. But, at the end of the day, it comes down to finishing those tight games, which they haven't done very well. And I think a lot of that comes down to, coaching that poise and coaching that discernment in those last few minutes. And then, as well as we mentioned, just bench problems and lack of depth. And you can sit here, and I've said it too, that they don't have the horses, but at the end of the day, he's the guy who's picking which horses are on his in his stable here. So if there's anybody to blame for people like Aaron Frank coming out and not having the best production, not being able to rebound, not being able to shoot, or the lack of backcourt depth, and kind of being disappointed with what we've seen out of Gabe Dorsey or Shane Dezzoni or whoever it is when you're talking about point guards, that those are Stack's recruits, and those are who he's putting on the team. So I do think that he deserves some criticism and some points docked off for some of that. So I'd probably say a C to a C+.
Yeah, I didn't do a good job of outlining the question because he asked us to grade in several areas. The one I was addressing was just the recruiting aspect, because he also asked about player development, game offense, and in-game defense. I think, and this is where I give Jerry better marks, I think his player development, man, I'd probably give him a B/B minus. Pippen, I mean, he deserves a lot of credit for that. Jordan Wright, he deserves a lot of credit for. But the problem there is they just weren't, SEC level players in terms of, are you going to finish in the top half of the league? In fact, he's probably got 3 of those on his roster. And after that, I mean, and there you go. Like, Jordan Wright is, in my mind, not a guy that's going to get minutes on the 6 teams in the league that are going to the NCAA tournament. But he's done a nice job with Jordan, making a lot more of him than he should. I think he gets a B or a B minus there. It's just the material that he started with wasn't very good. That's on him. I think his, everybody talks about his sets being pretty good. I think that's true for the most part. His in-game coaching, to me, has not been good. I think defensively, I don't think the first 2 years they've been very good. Now, defensively, I think this year he's gotten a lot out of them. So I'd probably give them as high marks for defense this year as anything. I think he's done a good job with what he's had. It just all goes back to what he started with.
Chris, I think that is the main thing about Stack that I think is really frustrating for you and I. I think it's frustrating for fans. I think it's just frustrating for the program in general, because there's so much to really like, actually, in what he's done with some offensive sets, with some of the aggressive trap defense that they've shown, and some of the defensive progress. As you said, player development, these aspects of him as a coach, you can really, really appreciate and really like and say, hey, I think we have something here. But that's been what sparked the debate, is as much as you want to credit him for those things, you look at the lack of depth on the roster and some of his recruitment so far. You look at some of the coaching late in the games and some of those decisions that have, flipped 3 or 4 games now into the loss column from the win column. And you're left with what I feel like is a pretty average overall grade, because anything that's positive and good about what he's been doing this year, you feel like has kind of been offset by these glaring negatives as well that really bring down the overall opinion of him.
Yeah, I mean, there's more here that I can say, but the process the first couple of years just wasn't very good. The rest of the league is out signing 4- and 5-star kids, and he's showing up at the state tournament. 2 months before Kima Udosipe graduates, finding him, signing him. He scores 10 points last year. Now he's in a MAC school. There was just too much of that going on. Jerry's issue, it's humility. It's listening to other people. It's knowing that the other coaches in the league do things the way they do for a reason. And he made his bed with his methods. And now he's lying in it this year. Now, how much that changes going forward, I don't know. Next year's class is a lot better. What's he going to put together in 23? I don't know. And the other question is is next year's class up to the hype? I mean, because if it is, then I think maybe he started to turn a corner if he can replicate it. But they're stuck where they're stuck for a reason, and that's really, for the most part, nobody's fault but his.
So, yeah, Chris, I think the one thing with that is the class next year is supposed to be better, but like you said, does it live up to the hype? Because Shane Dezzoni, Gabe Dorsey, some of these guys were very highly thought of recruits in their own right, and we've seen them have little impact on this year's team. So what does that look like next year for guys that are similarly rated? And then two, my question for you would be, you mentioned like that lack of effort in the first couple of years and how you felt like that got him behind the eight ball a little bit in terms of what he's able to do this year. Do you think there's a path back from that going forward? You know, we think he might be turning a corner, or do you think the ego problem or the humility problem, as you said it, is going to be something that hinders him too much going forward and is going to be an ongoing issue for the program?
Well, I've heard privately that he realized probably before this year that his players weren't good enough. And again, you saw the class he brought in. Now, there are some questions, and I've heard this in the coaching community, if those kids are as good as they're hyped to be. We'll wait and see. I'm not making a judgment on that right now. I'm just telling you what I have heard. I've heard some concerns about Dort. Shelby's already hurt. You know, the thing that I'll use this analogy, okay? I was looking for a car one time, and I found one online. It was about $3,000 below what it probably should have been. But it was a Honda Accord. They run really well. And I thought, well, I've got, let's say I buy $3 below value. I've got some room built in. If there's something wrong with it, I don't know. Took the car to mechanic, couldn't find anything wrong with it. Sure enough, within a year and a half, I started having all kinds of problems. This is one of the worst purchases I ever made. My concern with him is in diligence. Like, I'll give you an example, and this was before your time. Everybody knew that Isaac McBride wasn't going to work out here but him. And you can go back and listen to the pods I did a couple years ago, and I tried to tiptoe around it as much as I could. And you saw what happened, and now he's somewhere else. What I'm wondering is that still the case? Are they doing the diligence on the kids? Again, I've heard some concerns that some of the guys that they have recruited are not as good as the ratings are. I don't know that. I hadn't been to tournaments and seen these kids. I don't know. But my question is has he turned a corner in recruiting, or like my thing with the car, did somebody else know something that I didn't, that I should have known? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's kind of where my evaluation with him is on recruiting. I want to see how that resolves next year. Are those kids as good as the rankings have put them? And if so, and he's going to work harder and land those kind of kids, yeah, that's an entirely different conversation.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to what we said earlier about, kind of staying put in terms of his contract. It's almost like an NFL player coming upon that option after the fourth year here, and you don't know if you're going to exercise it or not, but you have to see that penultimate year here of, after he gets four potentially, ESPN has them all as 4-star recruits here coming in to Vandy next year. And he brings in 4 guys, all of some pretty high caliber recruiting status, coming into a team that should have some of his established veterans staying back. How does he kind of acclimate them in with the program? And then, like you said, is he able to repeat that sort of recruiting class for the next year? And if he can, and we see some more progress, you might feel good about him having turned the corner and his future at Vanderbilt. But if things kind of look a little bit like they did this year, where some of the highly recruited freshmen come in and don't do a whole lot, and his classes continue to just kind of fall right in the middle of the SEC, I think you have to start to question whether or not there's actual growth to be made.
Well, my concern next year is, unless they hit it big with a couple kids in the portal, they're going to be back to probably game 1 of the SEC tournament, or the Wednesday night game is a better way to say it. you can look forward and already kind of make the excuse for next year. Well, he's brought in this class. And to me, I think a lot hinges on how good this class looks next year. If they come in and they look like they're the number 12 recruiting class or wherever they are today, that's one thing. If they don't, that's another. You cannot extend him. He's got 3 years left on the contract. If you buy him out today, you probably owe him $10 million. Goodness, Vanderbilt's paid a lot of people to go away lately. And so I don't think you want to spend any more money there if you can help it. I think after next year, I don't know. I just see it set up to where he's probably going to get a year 5, knowing how Vanderbilt operates. And by that time, he's in 5. He's going to have 1 year left on the contract. I just think you got to let it play out, and maybe after 4 or 5 cut bait if it's not working. But I don't think I extend him at any point in there too, unless he just kills it one of the next 2 years.
I have 100% agreement on that. You said it. Hit the nail on the head right there.
Sam, any final thoughts?
No, not a whole lot. I'm kind of with you in that boat of, under 500 now. A lot of the shine that was on some of those tight losses and stuff kind of has really just been deflating over the last week or so, and some of the same issues occurring. And praying for a miracle, I suppose, in Tampa. I'm just really looking to see some progress and see them play some good basketball, and see where they're at. But not too many comments or too much to say regarding that front. Just excited for March basketball, regardless of where Vanderbilt may fall within that scope.
Yeah, that makes 2 of us. Hey, Sam, thanks for joining us. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones, DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.